Hello guys, it's Chandler doing another Bottleman discussion. Finally! So, today I want to talk about why magazines are so overpowered. This isn't really a new idea. I think anyone can tell you that they're overpowered, but I still think it can make for an interesting topic of discussion. So, let's go ahead and start with the prototype line, because there aren't many magazines here. So there is Samet's, which has its arms that kind of move back, that can accommodate a second cap, but it's not very good, and Dual Gold can support the Aquasports magazine, but I'm just going to talk about Aquasports and Rising Milk for this part. So first up, we got Rising Milk, and obviously it has, its giant magazine. This thing is just good on its own. This magazine was meant for Rising Milk, and I guess technically Fusion Black, but Fusion Black's core is worse with its awkward trigger, but anyway. This thing gives you an 8 cap capacity. It's huge. It is a little bit awkward. This kind of shape of the magazine that makes caps fall in awkwardly, so I'm get a little bit stuck. It like constantly move around, just kind of big and awkward. So it's not always the best option, even though it does give you the best capacity. But still, it is a very good option because it just has so many caps, and I feel like this is the difference between a magazine, especially like this, and anything else, because with something like Kolomaru, it's a good power type, but Tenseitan, in my eyes, is a better power type, although I guess you can maybe have Tenseitan's arms on Kolomaru's core. That might be the best, but just in stock. I feel like it's always worth using Tenseitan over Kolomaru because Tenseitan just has more power, because, well, power types generally don't have magazines. Well, you're going to want the strongest thing, but with speed types, you kind of get more flexibility. You can choose how you want to handle things because, well, capacity just allows you to do that. Even though it's just awkward, it doesn't matter because an 8 cap capacity is just inherently good. Now, Aquasports, on the other hand, this thing only has a 3 cap capacity, but the way the magazine attaches kind of makes the arms come out, which, in turn makes these parts go in, pressing on the hold parts, which gives it more power, and by doing that makes this thing a decent power type while also having a 3 cap capacity. And again, even though things like Tenseitan or Kolomaru are definitely stronger than this thing, it ultimately doesn't matter because a 3 cap capacity is just nice. That's why this thing is the best Bottleman, because you actually do get capacity, but also some power, which is helpful. Honestly, Aquasports' arms are like always worth using, unless it's like Rising Milk, but that's different because that has its own magazine. But like Tenseitan, alternate power type, you might as well just throw these arms on and let this be your, power accessory in a sense, instead of the power buckle. And Kolomaru, while you do get the, the grip that you can push in on, again, why not just take the 3 cap capacity? This is why this Bottleman is so good, because just having the extra caps does a lot. Now, there is the whole rule, I think that this is an official rule, I don't know if they ever retracted this or not, but there's a whole thing where you have to, basically, when you start an official match of Bottleman, which I feel like it sounds weird to say now, because I just never hear that, but anyway, in an official match of Bottleman, there was something to where you basically would have to load up the Bottleman once you start, which would be an advantage to kind of the single shot Bottleman, which is probably a balancing mechanic. The problem is that by the time they get a shot off and are loading the second cap, you probably already have this thing or most other magazine-based Bottleman full, and then you just can rain a Hellfire or caps, so ultimately you're probably better off just using a magazine, even if it takes you slightly longer. I don't know if they ever retracted this rule. I wouldn't be surprised if they kept it or retracted it, honestly, but regardless, magazines are still very powerful, and it doesn't really matter all that much regardless, if I'm being honest. Single shot Bottleman do get off slightly better with this rule, but again, it's not going to matter because you can get a magazine loaded up fairly quickly, and by then you basically can win, honestly. It's ridiculous. Which is why I don't like that they try to kind of tie specific parts to different types. Well, with the prototype line, it's a little bit easier because, again, these arms could be used on anything, and I think the magazine could be used on anything because of that, so you can use other things, but if we're just talking stock Bottleman, that's why Aquasports is so good, because, well, power and capacity just wins. So I'll stop going on about this, and we'll go and move on to DX, because things changed a lot in Bottleman DX. Now, in the DX system, as well as the God Cap system, there were a few different magazines that are kind of normal, but for this, I'm just going to cover the long magazine. Look, the long magazine just kind of outdoes the other things, like I know Kokurio and Aquasports have their own magazines, but I just feel like this is just better. Why wouldn't you want a 5 cap capacity opposed to 3 or 4? Anyway. So a 5 cap capacity that could just be a normal magazine, yeah, this is ridiculous. You just get 5 shots, most of the time I get 1. This is why speed types were so dominant in DX, because Unlike the prototype line, attachments were restricted to certain types. It was illegal to mix and match in official matches, and because that's, yeah, speed cores had to use the magazines, and because that, again, they dominated. Things like Colomar Energy DX are insane. That thing has crazy power, honestly pretty control, but guess what it doesn't have? A magazine. And while yes, it has great power, it's still a lot better to grab a speed type with its 5 capacity. In my DX tier list, I did put Colomar Energy DX at second, but the problem is, it's really only second by a technicality. Because Doc-Pepion in my eyes is the best speed type, I kind of rated other speed types around it. But at the same time, you can kind of just use any speed type and probably do better with a 5 capacity. Ayawashi, funnily enough, might be the worst because I don't really like its trigger very much, but still, I think that speed types as a whole are probably going to be a better option. But I don't want the list to be boring, and also, again, Doc-Pepion's the best, so the other ones are technically outclassed, so I rated it around that. But anyway, there's really just not much you could do against capacity, and a long magazine is going to go a long way. Another big problem with DX is that magazines could stack, which is ridiculous. Now, there are certain magazines that can't stack, like, for example, CC Land DX, with its quick loader magazine, but the thing is that yes, you can use 80 long magazines if you want to, but that's not realistic. It gets to a point where it's a little bit too much. But what you can do is take a different magazine on your stack of long magazines and put that on the end, like this, because you can't stack more on the edge of this, so now you just get these as well if you want them, and you could stack more quick loader magazine, cases like this on the sides and just have a ton of caps ready to go. It can get pretty ridiculous, honestly. And do I actually recommend stacking like a ton of magazines? Not really. I think you're best doing maybe 2 long magazines, maybe 1 or something like this if you want to. Otherwise, it just gets really clunky and awkward. And honestly, 2 long magazines is already maybe a bit much, but it's still gonna work just fine. But like this can just give you extra, caps just ready to go, 4 in each. That works. Plus, this also just gives you a base 2 cap capacity with this magazine, which is also nice. In Godcap, you also did have Samet's G with its, one-way magazine, which can be useful. This one's a little bit weird because I feel like the higher up you go, the less effective this is, but it is still effective, so if you want to put this on a long magazine, that gives you a 7 cap capacity, which is pretty nice. And again, you're kind of just destroying the competition at this point with things like this. It gets pretty insane. Speaking of insane, Red Arrow Cider. This thing is very funny because it has a drive strip, but also a magazine port. So, in Random Collection Blame 2, we had some cores like this, and Red Arrow Cider having a drive strip plus a magazine port kind of brings back some PTSD of prototype Aquasports, because you get capacity and power. It's a bit of a problem. But I think this mixture just goes to show why magazines are so necessary, and why I don't like that they restricted them. I had an idea to where different magazines could require different ports, so maybe you have 2 ports on speed cores, so they could have specific magazines that are, unique to them, while allowing basic magazines to anything, because I think they're just a necessity. You severely cripple power types, and especially control types, when you don't allow them to have extra capacity. Red Arrow Cider really highlights this, because again, a power type that gives you capacity is just going to dominate the game, and that's why this was such a good Bottleman for its time, because, well, you did get both, and it was in the new system, and you can customize this, and you weren't limited to anything with, arms, for example. You could have other gimmicks if you wanted, you just had to have this core. That was it. You could even do another trigger if you wanted. Now, to be fair, Godcap did kind of expand on this idea. The problem with Godcap, though, is that the back half of the cores would either have a magazine port, or they wouldn't. They had different triggers, but it didn't matter. In no circumstance would you ever use Draggart or Decavi Tiger's core. Why? Because they don't have magazine ports. Why would you want that? You'd either use Kokorivo's or Samets's, because Kokorivo's have a magazine port and Samets would have this extra, handle here for, one-handed shooting. It was just a choice of whether or not you wanted that. Obviously you had to choose the magazine port because it's just stupid not to. Which I think just highlights the issue of how broken they were. Honestly, there was no reason to ever do this, because you had something like Dragogena DX, and this thing, it shoots 4 caps at the same time, it's massive, and they still gave it the server wing where you had an 8 cap capacity. It shot 4 caps at once, and you had 2 shots of that. Why are we restricting Bottleman to single caps when this can exist? There was never a purpose for it. And just to kind of give one last example, I think really just fully highlights everything here and just how important this is. For this example, we have Raid Brave DX. Raid Brave is one of 3 normal vertical shooters. You have Wonder Grape and Deku Tiger as well. You can go back and forth on which is the best. Honestly, Wonder Grape is just really consistent, and also has a pretty nice grip for one-handed shooting if you want to do that, and Deku Tiger has some good options as well, plus it's vertical cap. Honestly, I think Raid Brave might be the odd one out here, and I don't know if I'd say it's the worst for sure, but it's definitely a close competition between the 3. Or at least it would be if there wasn't a specific attachment of sorts for Raid Brave. So by taking off the edges of Driver Gina DX's wings, you could make this magazine that just kind of slots in the back of Raid Brave here. This gives it a 3 cap capacity. This is by far the best regular vertical shooter because of that. From what in my opinion could have been honestly the worst vertical shooter, not by much, it was still very close, and you could argue honestly for any of them being anywhere, but to me, I think it just had the least going for it. Again, doesn't excel at one-handed shooting as much as Wonder Grape, don't get the vertical cap and kind of additional force of Deku Tiger. You do get kind of a drive strip of sorts, but that's about it. It's not bad, it's just, I think the other two have a bit more, but now it has a 3 cap capacity, so it's automatically just going to be the best. Why wouldn't you want 3 cap capacity? That just sends it leagues above the other two in my opinion. And yet, magazines were just such a problem in Bottleman. Part of this video was just to kind of highlight this point I've talked about before, where why didn't speed types just have like 2 ports for unique magazines? You could have literally, if you want to keep the whole modular idea, you could have kept a special version of long magazines that have 2 ports on the back, but also require 2 ports, so you could, use your other speed magazines with them, and keep those restricted to the speed type, and then just have the 1 port versions with, 1 port in the back for anything else. There were ways around this for sure, it's just really frustrating that they just did not capitalize on this at all. And the other part of this video is kind of just going back to my speed ranking video. I just want to talk about speed types in general, kind of how I did with multi-types a few months ago, and control types as well. I don't know, I just feel like there was some discussion to be had here, and yes, a lot of the stuff is already known, but I don't know, there just hasn't been a dedicated video to magazines, I don't think, and I know I haven't made one, so I figured it was at least a topic to talk about. If you can't tell, Bottleman topics have been getting pretty sparse. I've made a lot of them. I'm still trying to think of some more. I have some ideas, I just need to think of how I want to make them. But for now, I thought this would at least be a decent discussion to talk about, and just keep Bottleman going, because it's kind of entirely dead on YouTube at this point, at least from what I've seen. Just in the English side of things. I don't know if anyone's even talking about Bottleman anymore aside from me at this point. Hopefully there is, but as far as I'm aware, it's pretty dead. But anyways, that's all for this video, so thanks for watching, and bye-bye.